we're going to be focusing on the year and what's happened in 2025. So obviously a lot of change in marketing, evolved. We're seeing AI evolving, CFOs becoming more critical, and audiences becoming increasingly challenging to engage. So with all of that in mind, we've pulled together a great panel to kind of talk through what we've seen in B2B marketing and to provide some pragmatic thoughts on what we might have ahead of us in 2026. So I'm Zoe, the CEO at Bright. I'm really delighted to be hosting today's session. And we really focus on helping our clients drive marketing effectiveness, help them to connect their strategies to their business goals, introduce agile operating models into the way their teams work, think, and behave, and build strong capabilities so that they can make the best and most of their tools, data, and tech. I'm going to briefly hand over to my speakers to introduce themselves so that they can give us a quick insight into their world. So over to you first, Graham.
Thank you very much, Zoe. I would describe myself as a commercial marketer, fully rounded in the full sense of marketing. So not just demand gen, but everything we think of as marketing. Been doing that for more time than I care to mention. So a number of years, mostly with organizations at an inflection point, whether that's VC backed or PE backed or corporate turnaround. Those inflection points, I think, invite marketers to make a bigger contribution to the business, and they open a window in the senior leadership team for marketing to have more of an impact. So that's very much where I've focused and been successful. I'm currently between roles, so I'm talking a lot of companies that are thinking about their marketing strategy for 2026 and are sharing some of their problems and challenges. So maybe that's something we'll talk about as we progress through the conversation. But excited to be here, kind of reflect on 25 and look forward to 26.
Thanks, Graham. Emma.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. I'm Emma Wharton-Love. I run Spark AI, and we work with agencies, with brand teams, with marketers to help them get best value out of the AI tools that they're using, and we help them understand where their business models are shifting and to proactively shift them in the AI era.
Thank you. And Karan.
Yes, hi. Sorry, I joined a little bit late, so I just got caught up on another work call. But yeah, my name is Karan. I'm the global marketing automation specialist for a security company called Securitas Technology. I basically manage our global MarTech strategy, our automation strategy, how we capture, utilize, and most importantly, weaponize the marketing data that we've got, how we pulling insights and providing those insights to different regions. How are we taking some of the workload away from our regional marketing teams and moving that into this automated, AI-assisted, personalized nurture journeys? And that's the kind of keyword I mentioned there is AI. So a lot of my focus at the moment is how do we re-architect our data model and structure so that we can move into this AI space where we've got a lot more agents getting involved in the analytics side of things and then the constant personalization side of it. So a lot of exciting things at the moment, but all around data and automation for me.
All right. Thank you, Karan. I love that. Can't wait to hear more about weaponizing data. And we're certainly seeing a lot of marketing enablement around AI. So I think it would be great to kind of dive into that topic around how you're integrating it into what you're doing and hear a bit more. So with that in mind, let's kind of get into our kind of areas that we want to focus on, and I'd like to start with kind of like where we've seen the biggest changes and shifts in 2025. So I guess really, like, for you, what was the most meaningful shift this year? And maybe Karan, maybe you could start with that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think a lot of the shift that we are seeing, and also what I'm hearing from some of our other teams, one of the big points is in GIO, which I believe stands for generative. Zoe or Emma, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's basically essentially SEO for AI, right? Is that right? What does GIO stand for again, Emma?
There's a few different terms for it, sort of knocking around at the moment, but AEO, GEO, it's basically how AI and agents interact with online content as opposed to humans.
Yeah. So, and we're seeing a massive shift at the moment in that. Like, we already knew that, in the post-COVID era, the way clients are searching for data when they are researching a particular company. Like for us, we work in the B2B space majority, so there's a lot more information out there, and we know that customers are doing a lot more searching in that dark part of the funnel before they fill out a form or they interact with us as a brand. So we want to make sure that now the information that is now being searched inside these AI engines, we are being referenced, and that's a pretty big shift. So yes, we're already working on the SEO side of things, and we're running these ABM campaigns to try to capture some of that dark funnel. But that's already been the case. I think this year there's been a massive focus on the way customers are finding information about us, and that's kind of being done a lot more through AI. So that's been a pretty big focus for us.
Thank you. How about you, Graham, from a CMO's perspective?
Yeah, so I think one of the things as you move towards the CMO role or marketing leadership role, you sometimes spend less time having the marketing specific conversations and more time engaged with the stakeholders. And so for me, the biggest change when we think about 2025 is actually what's going on around the marketing function and the changes in the business. And ultimately, as marketing is increasingly a revenue driver and a growth driver, actually understanding how the company makes money and the challenges that companies are seeing in that. And as I said, I'm in conversations across a number of different industries, and what I'm seeing is that demand is softening. Even if it's consumer, there's the cost of living crisis. If it's business to business, there's competing priorities. Every project that's getting signed off is having to compete for funding for AI projects and other initiatives. So the way that the buyer behaves, as Karen said, is changing, but there are real drivers around that, and that translates to sometimes marketers face skepticism around funding and investment. But I think in the next year, it's very definitely driven by, for a lot of organizations, it's not just skepticism, it's there are gaps to their plan. You mentioned COVID, the kind of post-COVID new normal ran for kind of 21, 22, 23. Some plans began to change in 24. And I think what we're seeing now is 24, 25 looks substantially different. So how businesses adapt to that, how they react to that, and how we as marketers kind of lean into that change in mindset to help lift more of the burden and drive more of the transformation. I think that's one of the big changes for 2025. And it's just so many businesses are struggling with plans that were written in more optimistic times, and they're having to adapt to today's reality.
Yeah, I think that adaptability piece is really crucial as well. Like the teams that we're seeing who are being able to meet their business targets and goals are the ones that are more agile, more adaptable, and have a very different mindset and approach in these times. Emma, have you got anything you'd like to add to this one?
Yeah, I think I agree with both those things. And I think on the GIO, SEO, and actually I heard a new term last night, which I think is a really good one, which is AX, so agent experience, basically, that kind of encapsulates everything. And I think that we really need to, in B2B marketing, really need to pay attention to how agents are interacting with our brands, like across each channel. They don't care about the same things that humans do. I'm not a deep expert in this particular area, but if you're designing for agents, they're not interested in like how much traffic your website gets. They're not interested in your backlinks. They're interested in different things. So I think that's really interesting. And then Zoe, to like your point about how it's like nudging the skills we need in ourselves in our teams, is quite a fundamental change. Like just in the talking about agentic experiences in terms of AI search, like you no longer designing for humans, designing for humans and agents is a whole mindset change in itself. But I think we're going to get more into that as we go through this talk, so I don't want to steal that thunder.
No, that's true. I think that's a good point though on the changes, like even like things that have been considered to be fundamental in B2B, like funnel models, etc., are going to change and collapse. And we're already seeing that with our clients in terms of that, managing that versus human versus agent kind of search. And it's a very interesting kind of balance that you need to walk to achieve that in your branding and your demand strategies.
And Zoe, I think as with all things marketing, the old stuff doesn't go away, right? You still need to do search engine optimization because there's still a huge number of people who have not yet changed their behaviors because AI has arrived. So now we have to do both things. We have to run business as it's run today and get ready to run it for tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts we're seeing is like, how do you get your teams future fit? Like, what are the capabilities, the ways that they should work, the blend of in-house versus outsourced skills and services that you need to be successful. And then communication, of course, Graham, we've spent lots of time talking about this. Being good at communicating into the business as well as out of the business is very important for the modern marketer. So I guess that leads us on to the next part, as we've already got into AI. So obviously AI has accelerated expectations of marketing quite quickly. How do you think it's changing the day-to-day work of marketing teams? I mean, this might be a good one for you to start with, Emma.
Yeah, sure. I'd actually bring it straight back initially to like the softer skills and kind of where you talked about, Zoe, with adaptability. I think, yeah, with AI in the world, it's kind of shifting to like needing more skills like, adaptability, curation, creativity, judgment. And they're kind of more general skills. They're less sort of deep expertise necessarily. And I think once you've got like a good AI tech set up and you've got your team trained in how to use it well, like that, two things is really important, that combination. Like you can then get like a really good first draft of almost anything that you will be wanting to output, whether it's like copy, it's decks, it's research, it's campaign concepts. So like the role as a human shifts. You're like less starting things from scratch and you're more editing, curating, and making decisions. So, and I think that's quite an important shift to kind of for team leaders to acknowledge in their teams and help nurture. So I think there's like a few consequences of that I see it through our work at Spark, and that's like you can't sort of bolt AI onto like old processes. We need to sort of to really rethink workflows with AI in the world and what handoffs look like, what good looks like, all that stuff. And I think the teams that I'm seeing that are really kind of pulling ahead are investing as much, if not more, in their people as they are in the tech. And they're acknowledging the sort of this transition of the like the day-to-day work of the team. And acknowledging that may mean a new business model and a slightly shifted balance of the types of roles that are needed over the next few years, or and acknowledging those things up front. So I think it's a really interesting time. So it's a time that calls for really great leadership skills.
That's very true. I would agree with that. I think the other thing we're seeing in terms of the way that teams are working day to day is much greater emphasis on cross-functional teaming, which is something that's always been, an issue where you've got silos. But I think, we're now seeing like a real necessity of working closely with particularly your technical colleagues as well, whereas maybe before we would have been very focused on our sales colleagues, but now of course we've got to as we shift to use these tools and technologies better, then working hand in hand and having a clear way of developing custom GPTs, for instance, you've got to be able to have a sort of repeatable approach to that aligns the marketers with their more technical colleagues and the other functions that are involved in that approach.
I see exactly the same thing. I completely agree. That's really powerful, like that very close relationship between the technical partners and the subject matter experts.
Exactly. I mean, B2B, that's always actually been quite critical. The more high performing teams always had very good cross-functional kind of collaboration with subject matter experts, with sales, with product, with partner and alliance. But now I think technical is becoming also a key member of that team. And we're seeing models like we're building operating models which are like factory models for repeatably building GPTs, etc., for marketing to activate and enabling their teams to do that. Karan, I was wondering if you might have a few things to say around this because you're doing a lot of work at the moment around your workflows.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Emma said a really good thing there around data and the structure. I think, with AI, your AI, whether that's an agent or whatever, is only going to be as good as the data that you feed it. And a lot of the work that we are doing now, also similar to what Graham said, is setting ourselves up for the future. We have, obviously a marketing database which is housing all our marketing information, but then we'll also have an ERP or a billing platform that's holding client information, and we'll have a CRM holding sales information. And how do you start to then get all of these systems talking to each other? That's been a big problem. And all the integration of data has always been a problem in every single company that I go to. It's never perfect, and I'm sure in a lot of your companies as well, you're also going to have gaps, right? But now when you move into this age of AI, where it has the ability to siphon data from all of your different platforms, aggregated into like the most important thing that we as marketers want to have, which is a single source of truth, right? So we want to be able to take information from all these platforms, build that single source of truth, and then enrich our marketing platforms with billing information like contract start dates. And that's proving to be quite difficult at the moment, and especially for a company of our size, where we've got multiple different regions. All those regions are using different tools and platforms. We are trying to essentially re-architect how we are storing and managing data, and then how we can then start to share that data with other platforms, but also with suites of AI agents which are going in there to do our analytics and to do data normalization and enrichment and things like that. So yeah, it's a big shift around making sure that your data and your structure is suitable enough to take on board these new agents. The other part of it I found is, obviously, I'm sure a lot of you have been hearing the word AI for a long time, and there's a lot of solutions out there that have now introduced an AI aspect to their service offering. And I think it's almost, it will ebb and flow a little bit. Where we got excited, we started like searching for a lot of different AI tools. Then we found out that, hey, we can start to do a lot of this stuff in-house with some custom agents that are a little bit more tailor-made to exactly what we want. So there is an argument now with the introduction of the new protocols to allow AI agents to access certain tools. You can do a lot more of this stuff in-house. So as Emma said, upskilling your team to understand how to build these agents for your specific tasks is massive. You can go too far down the rabbit hole and start to build an agent for everything, and I fall into that trap where I'll spend hours building an agent to do something so simple, and it's probably taken me more time to do that versus just doing the task manually. So there will be a learning curve in that, but yeah, there is so much opportunity for people to be able to scale and analyze data faster, more efficiently, and then feed that into what I love to do, is analyze data from AI into active campaigns, so it can influence like personalized content or a particular stream of a nurture program. So yeah, very, very exciting times ahead.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's briefly step away from AI and talk about some other things that we've seen this year. So I think generally there has been tightening of budgets, and Graham, you alluded to that earlier, and stretched resources, and really thinking about how teams can do more with less. And obviously we could have an AI answer to that, but let's think about the other things as well that we're seeing. So it would be good to kind of maybe get your perspective. I think, Graham, you held a not inconsiderable budget as a CMO, and like what the pressures have been, and how you've had to kind of try and deal with that.
Yeah, thank you. I think 5 or 6 years of driving a significant performance improvement on an entirely flat budget teaches you that there are always ways to do things differently and better, more efficiently. Sometimes that is about how you work with your stakeholders to agree what the team will be accountable for delivering. In a lot of organizations, marketing is quite loosely defined. So it's a collection of all sorts of things. And I'm sure someone somewhere is spending time today worrying about, did the Christmas cards get out, which somehow seems to end up being a marketing responsibility, which seems to have absolutely nothing to do with marketing, but is the kind of evidence of the stakeholder saying, hey, we need to make sure the Christmas cards go out. So I think it's understanding the remit and then making sure that all of the resources and effort are focused towards the right activities. And I've come into a number of different functions over the years in VC, private equity, corporate backed, and they all have the same sort of features, right? There are things that used to be important to the function that they've never let go. There are things that stakeholders still expect but are not making a meaningful difference to the business. And there are new things that the marketers know they need to be trying, but they're struggling to build into their capacity or into their resourcing. So it's how you get smart about that, how you manage the stakeholders, and how you create the space for the team to thrive, do the new things, put down the less effective things, and reinvest the savings into what you've agreed with the stakeholders the team is going to deliver, which is typically growth. And I think that just gets a sharper and sharper conversation. And what's been really interesting for me over the last year is a broader understanding generally that that gap between demand capture and demand generation. And so the consistent investment in performance marketing without investing in the longer term story around brand and trying to hold all spend to account for results in the week, the month, the quarter. I am starting to see some sentiment change where people are saying, actually, having milked this brand asset for maybe a decade and not really investing in brand because we've been so focused on performance, now the performance numbers are struggling. Customer acquisition costs are climbing, cost per click is climbing, payback period is climbing. How do we get ahead of that? And it's not always a fun conversation to explain to somebody, actually, undoing that 10 years of milking that brand is going to require some level of investment. But I think it's a change in stakeholders. And so that definition of what is more and what is less is going to consistently evolve. And I will say it'll be different in every function. I love these sessions because you get to hear about the bleeding edge, Karen. Some of the things you're doing just sound so forward thinking and innovative. But there are a great many teams when I've come in couldn't even tell you what their process is for a workflow or an execution. It's never been documented. It's in somebody's head. They have no hope of automating that or bringing in an AI until the groundwork has been done. And oftentimes that involves bringing in external resource who's actually going to look objectively at what you do and try and help you move more quickly to say, actually, we're going to document that process alongside the way that you run it. Because some people have lived it so long, they can't even see it anymore. So yeah, knowing where you start from, knowing that even though you're going to see lots of people talking about great, amazing things they're doing with tech, not everybody's there yet. And where you're starting from is the only place you can start from. So if you're behind the curve, you're probably not as far behind as you think you are, but now is the time to start that work, whether it's the alignment with stakeholders over what good looks like, whether it's the documentation of process so you can start to improve technology, or whether it's actually the redeployment of budget into the new things that need to happen. There's lots of opportunity at the start of a new year to do that kind of work.
Yeah, very good. I think as well, like Graham, to your point around being very clear on what is the role of marketing and the value it is delivering is so key. As well as then getting into that, as you say, much more clarity on the nuts and bolts that support that, and having some understanding of like the work in progress limits and how you're going to remain focused and prioritize properly.
Yeah, coaching the team in marketing is fortunate that we get to work with all kinds of stakeholders across the business, some of them very senior and very influential who are used to demanding something, a country manager or a general manager who's used to coming to that lone marketer in an individual country and saying, I need you to run this event I've just booked us into. It's like, where did that come from? Who's paying for it? Where does that sit in relation to the backlog of work we already have accumulated? So establishing those agile processes, the methodologies, it just frames the conversation differently with stakeholders. And that then allows you to do and invest into some of the new and interesting things that are going to deliver a change, but maybe a little further down the line.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move us on because I can see that time's ticking, and as with all of these conversations, there's so much to cover. But why don't we move on and talk about high performing teams and really like what do we think the high performing teams are doing in B2B differently this year from those who've struggled. Perhaps Karen, it would be great to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. Just hearing Graham talk, a point came to my head, which this question kind of relates perfectly. Something that we've been doing and something that I focus a lot of my attention on. I sit in the global team and I'm responsible for managing and supporting all of our regional businesses in executing their marketing campaigns, whether that is an event, whether that's just an email campaign. And what I have found is that for me, in order to allow them to do more with less, they're now asked to do so much. And, with now the introduction of AI, everything is now ramped up. standardization and globalization is the number one thing that's really helped us. So, to Graham's point, we, for example, very recently introduced a standard process of how we approach the promotion and marketing of events. So that starts with the pre-event. How do we have a process to capture through a standardized form that we can use on any event that is booked throughout the year? Then, more importantly, what actually happens on site at the event. Previously, we would rely on the event organizer to provide us post-event with booth scans or whatever. Now we want to take the conversation and control into our hands. So we've now provided, again, standard forms for all salespeople to use at the event where they can capture information. They will select their name, which means that I can automatically feed that into our CRM. I can assign that lead to them. I can send a follow-up email, and that conversation can continue from day one, literally as the event has finished. What also then happens post-event to everybody else, right? Like, how do we follow up on things by sending thank you emails and also feeding those leads into our CRM for sales to follow up? That whole process just for events we have standardized, and that's now a standard framework that all of our regions use. It then takes the guesswork out of it. It then also saves on the bandwidth for all of our other teams that have to constantly, in the past, rework the wheel. So simple things like this, having a framework for a particular type of marketing, allows our teams to just focus on what actually then matters, right? Filling the top of the funnel and, making these maturity growth. So that's something that we have really seen some benefits from. And I think that's working really well.
Yeah, and I think events is a really good example. We do a lot of work with, some of the world's largest event organizers, actually, and who are obviously very good at running events. But, there is still a lot of upside in standardizing how the teams are working on those events, the approach to running into them, the pacing around tickets, and then, of course, the integration of on and offline is really key for them to drive the most audience engagement and value through those. But they've only achieved like the levels of growth, audience growth, through really doing what you said, through standardizing, establishing repeatable process, getting much greater handle on their data and insights and how that it integrates into their cycles. Really moving them through a process that's a framework that they can then customize, of course, within their industry lens or whatever the focus of the event is. So I think, some of those, building this repeatable, scalable approach and allowing them to have a framework where they can test and learn and rapidly improve is so important to those high performing teams that we work with. I was thinking about, Emma, really your point earlier where you talked about investing in your people, and I think there's probably something in that as well in this.
There is, yeah, and like I totally agree with Karen and the standard operating procedures. Like, also without those you can't introduce AI well anyway, and the same way without being really serious about your data foundations and looking at what's out of date, what's unengaged, and what's just simply being stored and costing money and not, all that stuff. You need to get those right first. So I completely agree with those foundations. But yeah, the third kind of spoke for me is investing in your people, not just the tools. And I harp on about this all the time because the most, I guess, I look at everything from an AI angle because I'm so immersed in it. So I'm going to talk about it from that angle. But the most effective teams that I'm seeing out there aren't sort of doing one lunch and learn on how to prompt. Sorry, my mum's calling me. On how to prompt. Hopefully she won't try again. They're kind of, they're introducing a structured program because you can't just learn these things in a one-off thing. It's it's a muscle that we need to sort of learn how to instinctively start to do. And they're kind of also being, as I talked about earlier, about upfront and sort of consultative and learning together as a team as how jobs are going to start to evolve and developing that together. So I think it's about really empowering people with giving them the right skills, but also by giving those skills, you're demystifying, you're taking the fear out of things, and about having inclusive conversations about where the role of your team is going and how the focus might slightly shift or may not, as a team is really important.
And I would just add to that, in developing the team, keeping an eye on the marketing fundamentals as well, so people are able to grow their careers in the function and then apply AI, whether they're in product marketing or whether they're in field marketing or whether they're in digital, but continuing that learning journey. Because as we try to work out, how to do more for less, great example is the final beginning of recognition that actually you don't need to replace your creative every year. That creative wears in, it doesn't wear out. So, you can actually eliminate some work that teams are just doing on a run rate because you've got a deeper understanding of how marketing actually works.
I think first principles is really key, actually. Just even foundational things like, have you got a proper understanding of your persona? Your personas, are they up to date? Do you know how to segment your data? Do you understand the journeys? Are you using data to inform that? And we still see a lot of poor practice, I guess, at that foundational level, which then holds back those teams from being high performing, because sometimes skipping over those things or under investing in them is detrimental to the actual impact that you can make in market. So yeah, I think some of that stuff is becoming more back in vogue. So let's move on to the buyer journey, because a messy buyer journey has been a topic that's come up a lot this year as well. And now with all our data and insight and all our AI tools to give us greater insight, we can understand that potentially better than ever. So what do you think is the hardest part of today's B2B buyer journey? I think, Karan, you had to...
Yeah, I think for me, a couple of things, right? So I think it's very easy to start to create a lot of content and campaigns that we think are effective, but they're not always tied into a specific stage of that buyer journey. So a lot of the work that we did when we were planning this year's strategy, and we've done the same thing again when we're planning next year's strategy, we have essentially looked at all of the different campaigns and KPIs that we're trying to achieve and create next year, but tie them all back to a specific stage. So for example, we do a lot of work around awareness, right? To push, like Graham said, push that brand out there. But we know that that is only going to affect the early part of the brand journey, the buying journey, sorry. So that also then influences the types of content that we create, the channels that we use, the messaging, and understanding. For example, for a B2B business, we know that our solutions are not cheap, then we are working with some of the biggest brands in the world. So you're not going to close a deal by just talking to one single person. There is going to be a buying group of people, and those individuals within the group are going to get involved in the journey at different stages. So in the beginning, when you're talking to someone top of funnel, when it's just around awareness and research, it probably may not be the final decision maker. So the messaging and the pain points that they're looking for and the information you're going to give back to them should be slightly different. So how do you identify that, right? So that takes a little bit of research and work to identify who is part of that buying journey, what is their important points, I guess, and yeah, where they kind of fit in. The other part of that is really the dark funnel piece, right? So yes, you can curate your buyer's journey to be absolutely perfect. As soon as someone enters your universe and your database, you can nurture the hell out of them, and you can help increase your pipeline velocity and get them to sales on a silver plate. But we now know that there is so much research that goes on before somebody has made themselves aware to you. So a tactic that we have really found is supercharging our pipeline is ABM, which is account-based marketing. And we've now kind of evolved that to ABX to include like account-based experience. But that is using certain tools like Sixth Sense or Demand Base. These kind of tools identify when your target audience are looking at not only your site, but also your competitor's site and similar bits of information. And when you can highlight or identify those people, these tools help you then show display ads to those people, right? So we're now putting ourselves in front of people who are doing the research to search for our solutions, but they have not necessarily filled out a form. And that's becoming the most lucrative part of what is driving the needle, is being able to target that dark funnel.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Any thoughts on that, Graham, from a sort of strategic?
ABM is one of those lovely examples of being really clear on your ideal customer profile, because it has a company name and a series of real people sitting in job titles. And I think in B2B over the last kind of 10, 20 years, marketing became very much about help the seller sell, and the salesperson was closing that conversation. But so much of that interaction is now happening before a salesperson even gets in the room. It was in the Challenger sale 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's just getting exponentially worse for the sales organization. So I think it just requires a mindset shift. We're not there to help the seller sell. We're there to help the buyer buy. And that involves, if they're sharing stuff through the dark funnel, how are you facilitating that? How are you super clear that you're the right answer for them? If they sit in your ICP, then you are going to be the best answer for the job they're trying to get done. And that should have a certain magnetism. There's somebody I follow on LinkedIn who talks about early product marketing fit as being, well, it would just be weird for them not to buy from us. It's such a logical fit, such a logical extension. That is a pure example of helping the buyer buy rather than helping the salesperson squeeze it into a profile. Now, easier to do in concept than in reality. But if you adopt that philosophy, then the way you produce content, the value you add to the decision-making unit, the kind of content, the kind of experiences you create, they're all slightly different because they're all about helping the buyer achieve their outcome.
Yeah, no, I think that's all. Very true. I'm going to move us on as we're coming up to, we haven't got much time left, less than 10 minutes to cover some of our thoughts really on 2026. So I just thought we'd skip ahead and start to kind of put our thoughts out there around what to think about next. So obviously preparing for 2026, a lot of people are, fairly progressed with their planning and getting all of that together. But I thought it might be interesting to do a quick stop, start, continue kind of question to you all and say, what do you think teams need to stop, start, and continue doing in 2026?
I can start with that. I think in general, I can sum this up in one way, and this is kind of again comes back to something that Graham was saying before. And I'm hoping that a lot of you guys, this is something that we have done in our 2026 planning, and I'm sure a lot of you guys listening have also done the same, but it's identifying what has actually moved the needle in terms of affecting your revenue. I'm sure throughout the year you've run multiple campaigns, you've had a whole marketing plan, and some of those things would have gone to plan, and new ad hoc stuff gets added in by stakeholders. And I think it's about sitting down to work out, right, I ran this campaign and it cost me X amount of pounds to run that. How much did that actually generate? And are we going to continue that next year? There's been a lot of stuff that we did this year that we thought was going to have an impact, and it didn't really have an impact on bottom line. Not everything and not every campaign is going to have a direct impact to revenue, but that's how we really focused our attention. By stripping down certain things, it allows us to really focus on the stuff that moves the needle. So that's really what I would say in terms of stop, start, and continue. Identify what worked, strip things down, right? You're going to have so many things to take care of, and there's always going to be ad hoc stuff that gets thrown your way and a couple of curveballs. So really just having a plan that is as simple as it possibly can be, but really focuses on driving revenue. Your stakeholders are going to like you. In marketing, if we can say, yeah, I spent this much money and I helped the business make this much money on top, and as long as that number at the end is bigger than what you spent, you're going to be in a good position. So those are the conversations that I'm having. Those are the kind of supports. And that's how I'm prioritizing how I support my regions as well. I get a lot of requests for ad hoc automation support, and I can't support everyone. So I really am now tailoring that support to things and campaigns that I know are going to drive hard revenue.
Great, thank you. Great answer. Emma, did you want to give us a quick stop, start, continue from your perspective?
Yeah, my perspective is very AI, I'm afraid. So, but I would agree with what Karen has just said in terms of an AI perspective as well. In terms of prioritizing where you are focusing with your AI spend too. But for me, on the stop side, it's like I get with AI, stop treating it as a kind of series of disconnected experiments without that clear link to the business outcomes. Really make a very clear link to the business outcomes. And a lot of people are doing this, but a lot of people aren't doing that yet. So on the flip side, start treating it, AI in your business, as a change and transformation program, not as a kind of thing the tech team's helping you with. It's a wholesale, as we've been talking about, like behavior, ways of working, role change, process re-engineering, exercise. It's not just adding a tool in. And then I guess in continue as well, and I'll do more of. Continue, like we've also touched on, like spending more time with your customers and really understanding your audience, really articulating that so clearly, because that will help any AI implementation get so much closer to the mark as well, by you understanding your customers so well, and then being able to give that context to your tools. That's what I would do.
Thank you. Graham, what's your stop, start, continue advice for 2026?
Yep. So building on everything that we've talked about, I'm going to focus on stopping the fear. Right. This has been 25 is a hard year. Lots of businesses are short on their plan. There's lots of world going on in the outside environment. Buying is more difficult. You have to protect yourself. You have to protect from burnout. You have to look after yourself and focus on the next year and say, what am I going to do that's different? And that starts with letting go of the fear of the consequences, right? Most marketers know the outcome that they're required to deliver and have smarter ways of achieving that. So lose the fear and dive into doing it. As part of that, and a big driver of the fear is AI, and we've talked about that spectrum of AI adoption. But wherever you are, start using it day to day in your own life, whether that's as an assistant, whether that's as a creator, whether that's as a strategist. The roles you can give to the AI, the more personally comfortable you are with it, the better you will be able to shape the adoption across the team, the adoption across the organization, and the impact that it has on you and your role. We know it's going to have a massive impact. Emma and others are ahead on that curve in terms of understanding that and creating the tooling. And Karen, sounds like you're well ahead in terms of building workflows and automations. But even if you're still at a standing start, many of the teams I've come into in the last couple of years have been at a standing start. Get yourself used to it, get hands on with it, and get comfortable, because you will then be able to create what comes next. And I think that continue to push, right? Continue to bring some creativity and joy into the work. We're very grounded in numbers, we're very grounded in performance. But this in 2025, I rolled out a program that basically launched a perfume that represented calm, confident paydays. And we called this thing Love Payday. And it was just one of the most fun projects I've worked on in years. Rolled up my sleeves, got stuck in all parts of the marketing proposition. It drove pipeline, it drove funnel performance, but it was genuinely a creatively different execution. Something that wouldn't have been possible in an organization I was with previously, but I'd moved to a world where it was smaller and more accountable and I could do that. That joy in doing what we do and driving the output, let's look for more of that in 2026 and unleash our capabilities, not in the sense of Can creativity. And Zoe, you know more about Can than anybody on this call probably, but in the sense of just bringing a little joy to your work and doing something that you are proud of.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Yes, I mean, I think from my point of view, I would say that people and marketers need to stop over communicating the wrong things to their business leaders and find meaningful metrics and consistently use those to demonstrate value and to align to the business goals. And I think, that's an area that most marketers can do a better job on quite fairly easily. I would say again around the start, invest in your people to help them, enable them to use these tools, and the data and all of the different pieces within the marketing operating model that need to be aligned in order to really get the value. Especially if you're under pressure to do more with less, you still need to build capability in order to go forward. And part of that is mindset as well, as you said, Graham. Have some fun, find some ways to be creative in what we do as marketers is a really important aspect of all of our jobs. And then I guess continue is a lot more focus on building repeatable, scalable approaches, systems within your workflows that will allow you to get more automation in there, to take advantage of agentic AI, and to continue to go forward and build, growth within the business from that. So, and I think the other thing is that role modeling is really important as a leader in marketing. As you said, like try AI, try tools with your teams and help them to understand as well, like how that works in their environment. So the governance, give them clear kind of guardrails so they understand what they can and can't do. And that leads us to the end of today's webinar. It's been a really fantastic discussion. I want to say thank you to the panel. It's been really great to get your points of view. We will share the recording and we'll share some reading lists and notes as well. So, and thank you for everyone who joined. I noticed you got a couple of questions, so we'll pick those up offline. But yes, just leaves me with, I hope everyone has a really good last few weeks of the year and look forward to 2026.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Zoe. Thanks, everyone.